Welcome to the Rusted Garden. Today's tour is really about managing pest disease, pruning, staking, all kinds of tips. I want to start up here with my container tomatoes and get in there and show you a leaf spot disease that's on there. Talk about how I'm controlling that. I have a video I'll link to show you more. If you're in an area where you get intense sun, especially when it starts getting into the high 90s, you could use something like this. This is actually a tent that I used for my kids when they were younger, when we would go to soccer games and stuff like that. No light, of course, gets through there, but where it's positioned, shade gets cast down onto my plants, and that helps deal with the heat. You can also use shade cloth. Shade cloth will let sunlight through anywhere from 10% to 80% depending on what you buy, but you can hang shade cloth over your tomatoes when you start getting into the mid-90s, the heat's coming, the full sun's coming, and that just helps your tomatoes continue to grow because they will actually stop producing when it gets too hot. It's kind of a way they sort of hibernate and they protect themselves because the high temperatures are just not optimal for growing tomatoes, so they stop producing. Container tomatoes, you definitely want to have a good sized container to maintain your plant root system. When their plants are small, you think you could get them to something small like this, but then they grow massive. These are all Determinate variety tomatoes, and if you look in there and you can see on some of the leaves the brown marks, that's leaf spot. I had a nice outbreak about 7 to 10 days ago and started spraying. I've slowed it down, I've controlled it on some plants, but for your spraying, you definitely want to start spraying a couple weeks before disease comes to your area. And that's to help stop stuff like leaf spot. You can see it on there. That's not progressing. That's been like that for, I don't know, at least 7 days since I shot the video that I'll link to this. These are all Determinate variety tomatoes. Gives you an idea of the size container you want to put them in. Determinate variety tomatoes get to a set height like they are now. They'll grow just a little bit more, but they're all flowering and they're all fruiting. And then the plant dies off. Now here's something that's interesting. This is my silvery fir. You can see a lot of die off and you might be worried. Is that a disease? Is it a problem? It did have some leaf spot, but this variety just starts dying off quickly. So it's producing its fruit, and when I get down to the lower level, to the earth beds, excuse me, swallowed a bug, you'll see that that silvery fir plant, same variety, is dying off like that. And that's how you know that it's not a concern, because the rest of these plants look pretty good, but that variety is dying off. Cucumbers, 3 seeds to about a 10-12 gallon pot. Those are bush variety cucumbers. I will remove one of those, the weakest one, and allow it to trellis up. But you can do cucumbers in pots about that size that are bush type, so that they just don't grow all over the place. Again, you know, it looks like 3 little cucumbers. They'll be perfectly fine, but once they get large, it really becomes problematic. Now, my garden's being changed over from cool weather crops to the warm weather crops. A great way to get a jump, save yourself a week or two, start your cucumbers in containers, transplant them over. Of course, if you've got space in your garden, go ahead, put them right into the ground, but you'll see that I'm transitioning my garden over. That's why I do transplants. Same thing, here's the first wave of cucumbers. They are ready to go into the ground. I actually took the ones you just saw from a cup like this. These are my Indeterminate tomatoes. Some of them are getting in the ground. These are all my large beefsteaks, cherry types. I'll talk more about that as we get down there. All right, let's take a walk down to the earth beds. You can see that I've cleaned this up. I had all my cool weather crops, a lot of lettuces and greens in there. Let me show you what that looked like, and then we'll pick up the video right from down there. Here's what everything looked like before I cleaned it out. It's really time to get rid of your cool weather crops, get your warm weather crops in. You can see the hops vines need some feeding. So everything will be fed. I'll get my sprays down, getting ready for the white moth that has been around for the last couple of days, the cabbage looper. Some of my plants have a spot disease on them because of this crazy rain we had. But anyway, this is what it looked like before. So you can see I really cleared out all the cool weather crops. Anything that was a leafy green, it was time to go with the warm weather that was coming. they were beginning to flower and they were getting bitter. And when your cool weather crops grow into the warm weather, their goal is to flower and produce seed, and actually they become bitter. And you may notice that sometimes if you ever break off your lettuce when it's warm, I'll show you an example as we move to some that I haven't pulled out, you have a white substance coming out of the break. That is what makes your lettuce bitter when it becomes warm. So I got in here, removed what had to be removed, and I've started growing the Indeterminate tomatoes that you saw up as transplants. This is my Brandywine garden, so I have a Brandywine red right there, and notice that's a potato leaf variety, which means the leaf looks more like a potato than a typical tomato. And when I show you my potato plants, I'll show you how they look similar. This is a Brandywine Yellow. So I have Brandywines here. I haven't mulched yet. I'll talk about mulching in some other places. The kales are cool weather crops, but they will do perfectly fine through the warm weather, so keep them in your garden. In fact, you could cut them back to just a stump and they would regrow leaves. I have a Brandywine pink back there, Brandywine black right over there. That's a different leaf than the three I just showed you. Those are my American flag leeks that I started indoors. Walla Walla onions, they all stay in. They're doing really, really well. Here are some potatoes growing in the 5-gallon buckets. And you can see how that leaf from the potato looks similar to the Brandywine pink, the Brandywine reds, and the Brandywine yellows, and that's why it's called a potato leaf. Pepper garden is doing well. We've had the ridiculous amounts of rain like many of you, so these plants are finally starting to turn green, get to size. Stakes that I moved from up there that got to be cleaned up a little bit, but your potatoes do need a stake, just a single one in the ground. They are fragile, so when the weight of the fruit comes onto these, the pepper plants will actually break off. So you do want to start tying them up, and I'll have to start doing that this week. You can see how tall they're getting, but they were struggling with all this rain after rain after rain after rain. They were yellow, they were weak, but now that the water has moved out of the soil, they're greening up. They're doing well. Potatoes in the containers, they are starting to die off. That's normal. They're going to be ready to pull out of there in, I don't know, about 2 weeks. Eggplant can be grown in a 5-gallon container. This one got chewed up a little bit, but I got that under control. As soon as you notice holes or any kind of damage, get right on it with your sprays. If you got to use dust, use dusts. If you want to use neem oil, use neem oil. Whatever you want to use to control insects, get them onto your plants as soon as you see something going on, and you'll be able to take care of it. This is the other silvery fir that I showed you up on the deck, and you can see the die-off is starting to happen in there too. Lots of fruit, but the plant is starting to die off a little bit. And sometimes different varieties just don't do well in your zone. So what you want to do is keep a journal. Try different varieties of peppers, different varieties of tomatoes, different varieties of plants, and what plants don't do well, don't grow them next year. That's how you can figure out what will fit into your zone. Dwarf tomatoes, packed full of tomatoes. These little tomato plants are really, really productive. This is the Tiny Tim, get that dirt off of there, that I sell in my seed shop. You can see how nicely they're producing. And of course, dwarf varieties can be grown in these small containers. This is some of the lettuce. Let's see if I break this. If you can see, yeah. See how that white substance is showing up? That's what makes it bitter. Soon as it starts going to flower and creates a stalk, you get this bitter taste to it. I don't mind the bitter taste, so I keep them a little bit longer. Kales are doing really well. They've been eaten, and that's why they're cut back, but they can do well in a container. You just got to keep it watered. This is my green stalk container that was in the last tour that I've planted up with herbs and peppers, and it's doing really well. I'll be doing a video on that. I will link where I got this from. I do have an affiliate set up with them. I'll put a code down if you want to use it, but it's doing really, really well. You can see some of the pepper plants. These are all the stakes that I put in to support them. But my goal is to have, you know, about 15 pepper plants growing in this tower. The beans are in. They're doing well. Those were planted by seed, and they're going to go up the trellis, TP type trellis. Let me just show you the hops plants too. This is wild dill, well, so to speak. Dill really reseeds itself, so I just put it in the garden. Wherever it comes up, I leave a couple of plants and I get my dill plants growing. So the bottom of the hops plants are a little bit beat up. This is my first time growing hops, so I'm really learning about how I need to feed and fertilize them. So they've been fed with a water-soluble fertilizer, and I'll stay on that because this looks like more of a nutrient issue. But they're growing so well, just nice massive vines, that I have to figure out how to really take care of them. And as we go up, they've reached well over 10 feet. It's pretty cool looking. And the flowers are starting to come. The hops aren't quite down here yet, but I'll show you them in future videos. More kale. My tomato plants, the Determinate varieties. Determinate varieties get to the set height. They're perfect for containers if you're just getting started. They're doing well. Lots of leaf damage on there. That was something I didn't panic about. I think this plant was a little more sensitive to the different sprays I was using. Which is basically, really I was using baking soda and a milk spray. I'm not really talking about the milk spray yet because I'm experimenting with that. But this one seemed to get a little bit damaged. Again, don't panic. Just let the leaves do what they want to do. New leaves have been growing. The ones that were damaged are dying off, looking pretty good. Let's spin around over here. Now, this is the time when your kales, cabbages, broccolis, all the related plants start getting these holes. Those are from the cabbage looper, and it's that white moth or other moths that come, lay eggs on here, and as soon as you see this pattern, that means you have, oh, there's one. That means you have the cabbage looper or worms. And right above my thumb, let me move it around in case it's too bright. That's the worm that is eating holes in there. If you have one, you probably have a dozen. You can look underneath, remove the ones that you find, but you're definitely going to miss some of them. So you can start spraying this with neem oil, which I do sell and I recommend. It works really well. It has a chemical called azadirachtin in it, and when these chewing insects ingest part of the leaf with the neem oil, with the azadirachtin, it shuts down their gut basically and they die off. You could use BT. You could use dust if you want, but the whole key is once you start seeing this pattern, it's only going to get worse. And it starts as small holes and gets bigger as the cabbage looper or the worms grow. Here's some more of my lettuce that I kept. That's all going to come out. That's red romaine. Notice how big the stalk is because it wants to flower. And I've been actually eating it. And again, here's a great example. You'll see how quickly that white milky substance comes, and that's what makes it bitter. More tomatoes in there. Let me just show you how they're doing and talk about the caging. So this is a Fantastico, an All-America Selections winner from 2014. It's going to have masses of grape type tomatoes on there. Start with a small cage like this, helps contain it, keeps the vine from falling onto the ground, and we can move to stakes. You'll see the different ways that I'm trellising stuff. I am starting with watermelons this year. Good to see how that grows. I'm going to grow them vertically. Now here are my patio choice. Other All-America Selection winners, they're growing well, but pretty soon these are going to flop over, so I'm going to have to get stakes in them. And I'm just trying, 3 patio choice, the same variety, just to see the sheer amounts of tomatoes, fruit that I can get from these plants in a small space just like this. This, I believe they're a Determinate variety too. Peppers, I packed in along my blueberries, maybe 8 inches apart, just to experiment to show you that you can really pack peppers closely together, get a lot of production, and they'll do well. They're going to need to be staked too. Here are my blueberries, different plants that I've moved in here. Next year production will be great. Takes about 2 solid years for them to establish. The chicken wire is around those because rabbits will love to come in and shear your blueberry plants down. Some bigger cages. These are some of the indeterminate variety tomatoes that I showed you. This is a bigger cage. This is to handle a black cherry tomato type. This is one of my favorite. This is an Aussie heirloom tomato. This will produce 2-3 pound tomatoes. Again, they're all caged just to get them started. Here is the tomato that I've been growing that I started with the hothouse tomato cage, and it's loaded with nice size tomatoes everywhere. So this will be my first, I think, producer, and it's doing well. Up on the deck I had more leaf spot because those plants, I think, were packed more closely together, and with this rain, humidity, cool nights, warm days, it was really a perfect place for the leaf spot to start. I didn't have that for 3 years. Peppers in containers, doing really well. They're going to need to be staked soon too. Always include those flowers in your garden. They help bring in pollinators. Asparagus that I'm really letting grow. I didn't harvest it that much because it just looked weak this year, so I'm letting the whole root system reestablish itself. So here's an area that is doing really well, and I'll be doing my third video on growing large beefsteak tomatoes right in here, but I wanted to show you in the tour, just going by these 6-foot posts from Home Depot or Lowe's. They're $3. Cut a point in the end, put them in, and you're going to tie the tomatoes up. And you can see how they're falling over. You would just pull it in, put a loop of jute or strips of towel, something that's not too sharp that's going to cut into the stem of the plant, and tie it off like that. And you want to grow your plants upwards. These, people ask me, where did I get these from? This cage right here actually came from my mom. She used to have a garden, doesn't do it anymore, but she ordered these from a catalog, and you can just weave your tomatoes right up them. They're really nice. That's what I'm doing over here. Here's my grapevine. This is being sprayed ahead of time. I'm using Serenade on this because it always gets a disease. Serenade is an organic spray that you can put on there, and you can see these spots are starting in places, but I'm trying to stay ahead of it because for grapevines, for some reason, it goes to the leaves, it goes to the fruit. So again, spray early, control the problems that come in your area, and hopefully these grapes will get up to size. All right, I'm going to finish up with some feeding tips and some mulching tips for the tomato plants. You can also do this for peppers. Please subscribe to my channel because this is a tour. I'll have plenty of videos, 2 or 3 videos every week, just showing you what I'm doing in the garden really in real time, and I cover all of this in depth. So these tomatoes just got into the ground, and if you watch my other videos, when I put them in, I put 1 or 2 tablespoons of organic fertilizer, worm castings in there, but I want to just show you the top dressing. So the top dressing is different for tomatoes this size. They don't have flowers, they don't have fruit. This is blood meal. It's basically nitrogen. It is a, I believe, yeah, a 12-0-0 fertilizer, which means it's 12% nitrogen. There's no phosphorus, there's no potassium. About a half a tablespoon, and just sprinkle it around the plant. You know, try not to get it on the stem. It's hard doing it left-handed. That's just going to do a top dress of nitrogen, and when you water and it rains, it'll work its way down into the soil. I'm also using worm castings this year from Vermisterra. I have an affiliate set up with them too. I will link their site and my coupon code. I like the worm castings because it really brings in everything that's nature to your plants. Again, put it right on top of the blood meal. The beneficial fungi with the worm castings will help break that down more quickly. But that's just the top dressing that I use personally for tomatoes when they're about this size. Same thing with peppers. When they're small, nitrogen. For mulch, I like the shredded hardwood. Any kind works. And you would just put maybe a ½ an inch all the way around and just cover the whole space. So the feed, the fertilizer is underneath. It's going to go into the ground. This will stop dirt from splashing up undersides of the leaves of the plant, helps with disease management, and it also helps control moisture. But that's just the basic way I set up my plants. Let's walk over to the bigger tomato plants, and you would do the same for peppers that are larger. When your plants begin to flower and set fruit, peppers, tomatoes, you don't want to be adding lots of nitrogen to the plants because you're going to grow more leafy greens, so to speak, than fruit. So this is I think a 344 organic fertilizer, low in the nitrogen. Remember, the blood meal was like, I think, a 1200. 1 to 2 tablespoons sprinkled around the plant. I would put some on the other side, away from the stem. Tomatoes, peppers send out surface roots. Rain, watering will wash that into the ground. I do this when you see your fruit forming. That's my second big top dressing. A little bit at the beginning like I just showed you with a higher nitrogen, and then something with a lower nitrogen, more balanced 322 fertilizer. I would also drop in about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of the worm castings around there. I'm actually using worm castings more in the video series here because I'm trying to beat Callie Kim by growing this red beefsteak to a nice size and having a tomato that's bigger than hers come April 1st. Alright, one more thing I want to cover is watering with water-soluble fertilizers. I'll give you a quick demonstration on how I do that. For your water-soluble fertilizers, for your newer plants, I would do something with higher nitrogen. You can use the chemical fertilizers like Miracle Grow. If you don't like them, use a different brand, but use it at half strength. That fertilizer is always like 24% nitrogen. It's way too high. Cut it to at least in half. And all I do is soak the leaves, done. Put some water down right there, done. That's how I put in the water-soluble fertilizer. You could use worm casting tea, that's what I'm using. You could use fish emulsion, but you don't have to overfeed them by putting in, 1 gallon container like this and giving each plant 1 gallon. You're doing this about every 10 to 14 days, depending on the size of your plants. And that's just giving it a nice soluble form of fertilizer. And soluble means your plants can use it right away. And we're back over to the bigger tomatoes, and if you noticed, I put the top dressing, when they start getting fruit, right on top of the wood mulch. That's perfectly fine. Watering, rain will wash it down into the root system. Same thing, your choice of water-soluble fertilizer. Soak the plant leaves nicely, and then water in a couple of seconds in the base, and you're good to go. And 1 gallon will cover a whole lot of plants. Again, try and do this because you're putting water on the leaves. Try to do it early in the morning so that they dry before the intense sun comes out. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to my channel. I do videos, again, every week about really all aspects of vegetable gardening. Please check out my seed shop at www.therustedgarden.com. Thanks for watching.